Welcome to part 3 of our Learning 2030 series, a year-long effort to glimpse the future of education and to understand the enormous shift that is underfoot. The gradual disappearance of books and the increasingly rapid presence of screens across classrooms are shaping the future of how children are learning. The internet and digital technology is changing not only the face of education, but also our conception of what it means to learn. Welcome to the world of 21st century literacy. One of the leading ideas foreshadowing the radical shift away from mass education is fun. Here's what Doug Thomas, co-author of A New Culture of Learning, had to say on one of our earlier Learning 2030 programs about fun and how it is experienced in the classroom. You talk about a new culture of learning, which includes very strange concepts like fun,
yes,
passion, games.
Yeah. Explain how all of that is a part of education, if you would. Yeah, I think that I hear this all the time, that one of the criticisms I hear of classes is that they're too easy. Right? And the idea that we punish teachers for making learning easy and that we reward them when it's hard seems exactly backwards. If you can take the same concept as a teacher and make it easy for your students, and you can make it fun, you make them laugh and engage and play and have passion, that's the thing we should be rewarding.
We're learning, and it's school, but it's like we're just doing a game at home. Anything we usually do, but we're getting grades for it. So it's fun at the same time. It's in an educational way, even though we don't like to think of it as educational, it still is.
To those who have embraced 21st century literacy, the new coin of serious learning are games. Games that engage today's students in a way that books and blackboards no longer can. To help us understand the trend towards gamification in general and in education in particular, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, here is Gabe Zickerman. He's co-author of the forthcoming book, Gamification Revolution. And we want you, our viewers, to be part of this conversation, so tweet us your thoughts on fun and games in the classroom by using the hashtag AgendaTVO. Gabe, it's good of you to join us on the line from Philly. How you doing tonight?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
I want to start by quoting you to you. Had Shakespeare been alive today, he would not have written all the world's a stage. You say he'd have written all the world's a game. Why a game?
Well, games are just better systems for understanding the complexity of the world and how things interact with each other. In our previous concept of how we might communicate, especially as it relates to the classroom, we thought that the measure of understanding, the measure of success, was how well people could parrot back what they had heard, how well they retained knowledge. But today, all knowledge is available to everybody, completely free, absolutely accessible on your smartphone or your computer at any time you need it. And so knowledge becomes less the currency of the realm, and now it's more important to be a good systems thinker, to be great on your feet, to be able to understand how things relate to each other, and to understand systems in their entirety. We call that capability fluid intelligence, and that is a thing that games teach and help us explore in a way that no other form of medium has ever been able to do.
Fluid intelligence being opposite from what?
Crystallized intelligence. So crystallized intelligence is the normal thing we measure on things like IQ tests or memory tests. And fluid intelligence, which is represented as GF, is our ability to think on our feet and reason our way out of situations that are unfamiliar to us. And that's really the 21st century kind of intelligence that's going to be super important.
Okay, give us an example of how gamification revolutionizes the world around us, motivates staff, engages customers, that kind of thing.
Well, there's a whole bunch of examples of gamification at work that are pretty exciting, but one of my favorites is a thing called Speed Camera Lottery, and it was a design put forward in Stockholm, Sweden, where those speeding cameras that typically take your picture and send you a ticket actually work a little bit differently. Your tickets are based on how much money you make rather than on how fast you're going, so you can earn a colossal ticket. And the way that Speed Camera Lottery works, which was a design competition won by a guy named Kevin Richardson, is instead of passing by the speeding camera and getting this big ticket in the mail, anyone who passes by the speed camera at or below the speed limit is automatically entered into a lottery to split the proceeds of the people who speed. So you earn a little like lottery ticket every time you comply with the law, but if you break the law, you get a punishment. And this idea of constant positive reinforcement, this idea of constantly bringing a little bit of fun, a little bit of surprise and delight, feedback, friends, and fun, as we call it in gamification, has had a transformative effect on speeding in Sweden. It's lowered speeding by 20 kilometers an hour on average using this technique. the same basic principle applies to any difficult to change behavior, like getting kids to learn, like getting employees to be engaged, or getting customers to pay attention in this increasingly distracting world.
Is that anywhere in North America that you know of, the speeding, the incentive not to speed?
No, we haven't seen that implemented in North America, but we have lots of other great examples of kind of difficult behavior changes that have been really super successful in North America. And probably most folks are familiar with a product called Nike Plus, which is a little hardware and software product from Nike that you use when you're running or exercising. And now about 5 million people use Nike Plus to track all of their activities, to see how they're performing, to improve their physical fitness. It's transformed, the company, it's transformed what it means to be an athletics company, and also helped all these folks, achieve various fitness and activity goals. Critical to that is using the basic principles of games, feedback, friends, and fun, to make the system engaging.
Is it important to distinguish between the gamification that you're talking about and, say, game-based education, which of course would deal more with younger people?
Well, one of my kind of constant themes in talking about gamification in ed or game-based education, either way you want to put it, is that often folks are looking to find ways to replace teachers with games, but I think that's incredibly misguided. I think what we really need to be doing is thinking about ways to replace the pedagogical tools, books and videos and exams, with games, because they're significantly more effective at teaching in that context. The Kauffman Foundation just did a little bit of research that showed that a game can increase test scores by about 100% in a classroom setting, whereas the best possible lecture can only achieve a 17% increase in test scores. Setting aside the question of whether or not those tests are accurate, the bottom line is the pairing of great gamification with great teaching is the ultimate solution to our question about how to scale education for the 21st century. It's not about replacing teachers with games, and that's kind of big concern of mine.
Sure. Let's remind everybody that you are in Philadelphia, but you actually live in New York, but you're one of us, right? You're from Toronto, Ontario originally, and spent something like, I'm told, 8,000 to 10,000 hours when you were living here as a kid playing the game Civilization. And you learned a lot about history, I gather, by doing that. And my question is, how different would your knowledge about history be if instead of taking those 8,000 to 10,000 hours playing a game to learn about history, you just hit the books instead?
Well, I'll tell you, I went to University of Waterloo as an undergraduate, and part of my graduate study there was the study of gifted children and their social emotional affect. And it was an extraordinary time, and while I was doing that work, I also played this game Civilization that you know of. And I want to relate a little story to you from Civilization that helps illustrate the difference between book learning and game learning. So in the game Civilization, where you compete as a kind of country, you can develop different military technologies, and one of the technologies you can develop is nuclear war. So you've been playing this game for a while, and you've been competing with computers or other people, and at some point, you develop the technology to launch nuclear war against your competitors. And in that moment, of course, what you do is you launch a nuclear attack against some enemy that's been bugging you for the whole game. And when that happens, I'll tell you what happens in the game. When you launch that nuclear warhead, the first thing that happens if you have a democracy or republic is your Senate stops you from doing it. So in order to launch the attack, you have to become an autocracy or a communist government or military dictatorship. And then you go ahead and you launch the attack anyway. And when you do, you devastate your opponent, right? You devastate the city, your armies march right in. But it turns out that a few things happen. One, the whole world declares war against you immediately. So even your longstanding allies go to war against you. Two, the people in the city are restive and they will not become part of your civilization very easily. And three, the pollution that you create is extraordinarily difficult to clean up. Now, let me point out to you, I'll ask you this question. What lesson did the designer of that game, a guy named Sid Meier, want to teach me about nuclear war? And what didn't he do, which is more interesting than what he did do? He didn't throw up a box at any point that said, hey, wait a minute, don't launch nuclear war, it's terrible, nukes are bad, they're going to ruin the world, don't do it. He didn't do that at all. He let you do it. And in the process, as you destroyed the things that you built, as you ruined relationships, you learned an incredible amount about cause and effect, about the relationship between systems in the world, and what happens when you make certain choices. That's something that in book learning, we only get kind of in retrospect, right? We get that as a fact. But in the game setting, it allows you to pull all these different levers and see how complicated things interact. I'd posit that there's no book lesson, no video on Hiroshima or Nagasaki and the terrible things that happened there that could convey as appropriately the cause and effect levers for something like nuclear war. And so I'd say it's not a replacement for books, but I would say it's an absolute necessity to underline some of that factual learning with this kind of systems learning that games provide.
Great story. Okay, sit tight for a second, Gabe, because we're going to do two things. You talked about the game called Civilization. There's another one, in case some of our viewers are unfamiliar with this, called Total War Rome 2. And it's narrated by a guy named James Russell. We're going to play a little clip of that, and then we're going to invite somebody else to join our discussion. So stand by, and control room, roll tape, please.
And so here they're approaching the beach, and they're going to disembark to join the siege. And the combined battles really add a load of gameplay in terms of, you know, cat and mouse around the coast and the defense of the beach versus the defense of the city. And we're really experimenting with different ways to make that gameplay work really, really well. So here you see the guys disembarking onto the beach. This is, you know, what we're trying to achieve here is get a real sense of almost the Saving Private Ryan of the ancient world. So we really want to get the camera down and get that sense of that darker vision of war, where you really make this human scale of battle come alive, and it's part of that darker vision of war, a more gritty, realistic feel to the way the battles work.
Okay, let's welcome two more voices to our discussion here tonight at TVO. With us in studio, Jeremy Friedberg. He's co-founder of Sponge Lab Interactive. And Justin Medved. He's a teacher and technology and learning specialist at the York School. That's here in Toronto. And we welcome back Gabe Zickerman in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Okay, gentlemen, first of all, welcome to our studio here. Nice to have you along. I want to, just before we continue our discussion, play a little more, because that video is really quite awesome. Yeah. This is something from a little further back. It's, once again, Total War, but this trailer goes back about 5 or 6 years. So let's take a look at this and then we'll talk. Roll tape, please. Now, that's still pretty cool, Jeremy, but look how far we have come in 5 years, right? From the first clip that we saw to the second clip that we saw. So, given computing power nowadays, can you imagine, you know, this whole series for us is about imagining where we're going to be in 2030. What are these games going to look like in 2030?
It's a great question. Everything's changing so quickly, and I think one of the things that's very exciting that you're seeing emerge, especially in the commercial game community, is the changes in the input devices. That there's no longer this controller, that your body actually becomes the tool to interact with the game content. I think you're going to see that more immersive type of experience evolve. But if you look at, you know, we're very focused on these commercial games and things you might see in education spaces, but look to the professional training spaces, and you see some unbelievable game-based learning tools, like how we train pilots. Those simulators, it actually feels like you're in a plane. For the gyros and the equipment that actually move the simulated cockpit around. I mean, some pretty impressive technology, and it's really at the forefront already today that most people don't really realize, but it's here.
Just give me 30 seconds on Sponge Lab Interactive. What do you guys do?
We're an educational gaming company, but we're focused on the application of game theory, and that's very much the construction of game-based learning content and game-based simulations. But the infrastructure, the platform technology to bring those games into the mainstream education system.
Gabe, are we moving in a direction of being able not just to play these games formerly with controllers, then as Jeremy suggests, actually sort of more into the game, but I mean right inside it? Are we at the point where we're getting inside a game, immersed in it, rather than playing on the other side of a screen?
Well, I think that's the concept of being immersed is less about the technology and more about how effectively the game is designed. There's a concept called flow, which is elucidated in a book by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi of the same name. And the concept of flow is that, you know, over a period of time, if a system's well designed, you become sort of one with it and you lose track of the outside world. To get into flow, you don't actually need really immersive or sophisticated technology to make that happen. Anyone who's run or cleaned a house or cooked a dinner has been in flow at one time or another. Sometimes no technology is required at all. but it's all about how well that experience is designed. And just to kind of key off something that Jeremy just said, I have to say, I actually think that the whole notion of, focusing on what the educational system wants in terms of games or gamification is actually at the root of why we haven't been able to break through and build, games that are big blockbuster hits in education since Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. Teachers and parents want very different things for their kids than kids want. And until we put the kids' desire for fun, feedback, and friends first, we're not going to be able to build those amazing experiences.
Gabe, just follow up on that, because I remember, Where in the Heck is Carmen Sandiego, because that's got to be almost 30 years ago already since that thing was out. But younger people watching us may not have any memory of that. What was that?
Well, many folks have played a different variant of it, but Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, really the last great giant hit in educational software, mostly in the 1980s, was a game where you traveled around the world and it taught you geography by revealing clues. You were trying to discover the location of this sort of spy, Carmen Sandiego. And, it's an unbelievable story that in this, intervening time period, in almost 40 years, we haven't been able to deliver another colossal educational software hit. And I'd posit that's, us asking parents, teachers, and the education system more so than kids what they want. But the advent of the smartphone and the tablet, our ability to sell and move those products directly to children, now provides us with a great opportunity to change that order.
Okay, let's find the educational application for this. And Justin, that's why we've got you here today. First of all, just a word about the York School. Independent school in Toronto, 2 campuses, K to 12.
That's right.
How many students?
Just over 600.
600 students, okay. Any of what we're talking about today, is this happening in your classrooms yet?
Absolutely. So my job specifically is as technology and learning specialist, when I'm not in classrooms and working with teachers and students, I'm looking at what's out there, where are we pushing, and this kind of idea of where can I create interesting learning experiences for my teachers, vetting it all, and then coming out with the best tools, and then teaching teachers and how to implement those things. So in the case here where we're talking about the games, I'm going to look at 2 things first. The developmental level of a game. Who is it catering to? And then does it connect to the curriculum? Those 2 things are kind of the first lens that I apply. The next is, what experience is the student going to have that can't be replicated in, let's just say, a ha-ha moment with a beaker or something where I'm doing something, physical. What's going on? And so a couple things that are really exciting me would be the extent to which the game can then feed back to the teacher. Give us some data. Look inside the learning that's happening. Give me a sense of where I can take the conversation tomorrow. Once the game's been played, what data can I act on that lets me know where the student's at, where they need intervention, where they need help? What can I glean from that whole game that they've just played that will let me help them and basically take a look at the learning process?
But let me follow up on that, because parents want to know that their children are actually learning something by playing these games rather than just having a fun time in the classroom without the blackboards and the old-fashioned way of doing things. So let's just take that Total War game we just saw. Do children really learn about military history and the history of conflict on the planet by watching and playing those videos?
Yeah, that's a good question. I immediately look at that through an interesting lens too. Wow, that's amazing. What an experience that is. But then I have to then look at it, okay, it's a game, and knowing myself as being a boy playing video games, part of that game experience is winning it at all costs. And gaming the system, hacking the system, so to speak, is always going to be part of some learners' instincts. And so beyond what they're playing, they're also just looking to win. And are they some of those more meaningful takeaways? Is it passing them by? How are we really tracking whether or not they're learning?
As a parent, I'm getting concerned already.
That's right.
Because it sounds like this is more about winning and losing a game as opposed to, learning about the important dates in history, battles in history, who participated, that kind of thing.
Right, so when I'm looking at, okay, if I'm going to use valuable class time to engage students in a game experience, is it a wow moment? Is there something it can do beyond what I'm able to do, physically and through traditional pedagogical teaching learning practices? If it is, then I'll explore it. But if I can't, then maybe I'm going to take pause and look a bit more critically.
Does this work, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think just to bring in 2 points that both Gabe and Justin sort of brought up. One is, the validation of what these things are doing. And to what Gabe pointed out is really good design. And so a battle game like that, and like any game, is not, some people will like it, some people won't. And it's really about tailoring the experience for the individual. But if we take a step back and look at what games can do at a very fundamental level, we're talking about something we've been doing for a long time. This is nothing new. Game-based learning has been around since the dawn of human civilization.
Not like this.
Yeah, it's learning through play. It's the way our minds are designed. But what computers have added to that is data capture. And the data that is generated from these structures is incredibly powerful, and it's allowing us to do things like validating what's happening and being able to tap into something we think is very important, critical thinking and creativity. Some of the most important skills you as an individual need to master. Like, this is really what the purpose of education is all about. If you've mastered those skills, you can do anything. And games do that very well, but it lets someone external to that be able to both teach and assess those concepts. Is it working? How does this mind function? And I think the funness of it, as Gabe points out, yeah, you can build that into design. It needs to be tailored for the individual, but the data comes out of it can actually validate the system. So the framework of education, the institution, we need to know, are we making a difference? We have raw data to actually say, yes, it's happening, or no, it's not, and how do we fix it?
Gabe, I can imagine that there are young boys in particular who would love being immersed in that total war game as it relates to Roman centurions and so on. I wonder if anywhere along the way there are parents or teachers who say, this is too violent, this is too gory, maybe it is a good way to learn, but it's not for me. Do you run into that?
Sure. I mean, there's no question. The violence discussion is a kind of separate topic, but there's no question it has to be put out on the table that talking about how effective games can be and gamification can be at teaching doesn't at all, whitewash or excuse the effect of games on violent behavior. This is not a question of having to preserve both sides in order to get both of the benefits. I think the more salient point when we talk about questions like violence and so on is rather, what are the underlying mechanics in games that makes them so powerful? So I'm all for less violence. I'm actually a big believer in, in there being less violence. But some of the core things about those experiences are really super important. And critically, one of the main things that gamification in the classroom lets students do is it lets them fail safely. And what we understand about games is that the ability to fail and regenerate your character over and over again is a really powerful way to learn. If you look at the comparable ways that we teach in class, things like hardcore testing, like really funnel testing, or raise your hand and ask questions or answer questions, it's very, very unsafe to fail. So I run this conference called Gamification Summit. It's G Summit, and at the G Summit every year we bring an educator who's doing something really cool with gamification in their classroom, just on their own. They've come up with their own ideas and pushing it forward to see what they've done. And what we've seen consistently, time and time again, is that the most powerful combination of things is an educator building great lesson plans and being focused and helping students learn, combined with game-based modalities that principally replace books, and together with that, an environment in which students are having fun, they're learning, and they're able to fail over and over again until they learn the lesson.
Jeremy, should we look at some of your work?
Sure.
Okay. This is from Sponge Lab. This is, I think, a little less violent than the Total War one we just saw. The History of Biology. This is a trailer from a couple of years ago. Roll tape, please. Okay, what's the idea behind the game?
There were a couple things. When we sat down to design this game, we were looking at creating a game framework that was based around stories, but looking at trying to break down the barriers and disciplines that, they're 400 years ago, there was no such thing as a biologist. There was naturalist. So bringing together disciplines like physics, biology, chemistry, but also blending together political issues, social issues, and who these people were. Obviously the tools and the discoveries that they dealt with, but really telling their stories. And their stories are amazing. And like any good film, that's what connects your user in. But the way this particular game was structured is like a web scavenger hunt. So there's things to do in the game, and students actually have to go out into the internet and do their own research. It's all about solving problems, and they're tough problems, and they work together to do it. But it's really about exploring that problem-solving process.
Sounds like that winning angle is in there as well, though, right?
Yeah, it's more about the discovery, the satisfaction. I figured this problem out, and I'm progressing through a very compelling storyline that's based on things that are actually happening in the world today.
How long does it take to play the game?
Depends on
Depends how smart you are, right?
Really, it depends, because when students are working together in groups, the dynamic around the game is very, very different than when they're playing on their own, and it's somewhat impossible to cheat in the game because the content's already completely randomized. So some students will sit down to play in one shot, but it was really designed to be played over long periods of time with short, repetitive engagement. So it follows that traditional structure you would find in a learning system.
So long periods of time, meaning you wouldn't do the whole thing and sitting down one night for homework. Could it be played out over days or weeks or something?
Well, you can, but there are 14 missions in the game, and it was designed to parallel that typical semester-type time period. So we want people to be playing the game over about a week period, a mission, and it allows teachers time to guide them in terms of the issues that come up in the game, because it deals with ethical issues. It deals with political and social issues.
Now, Justin, I hate to keep harping on this, but this is the point of the program. Is this scavenger hunt, this different way, using video, fabulous graphics, and so on, is this a better way to teach biology than the old-fashioned way?
Well, I think two examples where I take things from the classroom, where rote learning, for example. So an 8-hour school day is a good use of time to teach the times tables and writing them over and over again. Some could argue those are the fundamentals we need. Others can argue that it's time to better spend, or you better use our class time for creativity, for critical thinking, for those aha moments. So if we can, where are we going to do that rote learning? Well, we employ a few tools that take that off the table and put it on the homework side. And there's a game layer added in. So we take students and put them in a kind of mastery game scenario where they're working at these problems. Khan Academy is an example. We actually use another service called IXL, but there's another one, Canadian one called Mathletics. And basically the principle is working on some of these kind of rote skills in a fun, engaging, game-based environment where your time and homework would have been kind of homework time is now spent doing times tables, but the incentives are basically connected to a game layer, and you're given rewards.
It's more fun to win.
And there's a competition element. Yeah. You're competing against people around the world. And that's where I see some neat wins. On the simulation side, we are able, like, we were just mentioning the idea of pushing and pulling and testing in a safe environment, failing in a safe environment. We use a series of kind of science and math-based game simulations that allow for that failure, because it's only through failure that you really learn. What happens if I do this? What happens if I break this and take this apart, put it back together, and constantly over and over again getting to the essence of the problem, making those connections, seeing systems and how they all interchange and interplay.
Let me follow up on something you just said with Gabe. I hear this expression all the time, particularly in education circles. We have to allow children to fail in a safe environment. Why is that such a big deal these days?
Well, as I sort of said earlier, and going back to the way that you keep asking the question about, is this game modality a better way to teach biology? And I want to, I'd encourage everyone to sort of take a step back and say, what is actually the thing you're trying to teach in K through 12 education? Is it literally biology the way that we used to think about it in this sort of structured method, understanding, all the elements of natural systems? Or is it the underlying skills that enable somebody to take the known knowledge that's now broadly available, that's freely available, that's available to you at any second of any day, totally for free, and take that and make something great out of it? In a weird and bizarre way, I'll tell you, I'm actually kind of a traditionalist about certain things in education. And the one thing that I think we've lost sight of, and gamified education is helping us regain sight of, is that most of what should happen in the education system is not about teaching like rote concepts. It's about teaching people a love of learning. It's about teaching them how to approach problems in a unique and interesting way. It's about teaching them the structures of critical thinking so they can apply that to the world around them and make amazing things happen. And so if gamification is the sort of Trojan horse that allows us to actually break through and start asking some of these fundamental questions, then we have at minimum accomplished our objective.
Now,
but
that's an interesting analogy, Gabe.
Yeah.
The Trojan horse analogy. The Trojan horse was not a good thing at the end of the day for one side, if you'll remember your history. Right?
Yes.
So that's a funny analogy that you would use.
Well, and I think in this case, the side that needs to lose is the sort of industrial economy stamp out 1 million kids who are capable of going and working in a factory or working in some office job, because to be honest with you, neither Canada's economy nor the United States economy is ever going to look like that again. We are countries that must succeed based on absolutely brilliant fluid intelligence and knowledge work that takes what exists in the world and makes it dramatically better. It's about invention. It's about discovery. So those are the skills that we need to be teaching. Frankly, I think most of the kind of rote structure, at this point is questionable.
Jeremy, a follow-up?
Yeah, I think Gabe is really onto an important point, but I think I need to make a distinction between this concept of game-based learning and the gamification of this system. And it's something we deal with all the time, that the game is a component. Like any kind of learning structure, this experience of going to school, it's just a tool, like a book is a tool, like a laboratory activity is a tool. I mean, if you're going to learn, if you need to teach about forest ecology, go to a forest. I mean, use the best tool at hand to do what you want to do.
But gamification is more a strategy.
Gamification, from our perspective, and what my team does, looks at, if you're going to plug this game into this system, what structures do you have to have around it that is going to incent those users to engage with it? When you're training pilots, you're forcing them to go to that simulator to use something. The commercial market has their own mechanisms of engaging, but now we're talking about education, and we're bringing stuff in, new technologies. How, when we turn it loose, do we get people to want to do this on their own? That's where these principles of gamification are really coming in. It's basic psychology. And the trick to this is understanding that there is no one system. Slapping badges and giving points, what does that mean? It's about me creating an umbrella structure for you, and how do I connect with Steve on a very personal level? What does Steve need? And recognize that Steve's needs in terms of motivation and reward are very different than Justin and Gabe, and very different from a student to a teacher. And the idea of looking at this is, have we got it right? Because right now, education is already gamified. The question is, I mean, clearly there is a reward. You work to get grades. You have to learn to play this structure to get to the test, to pass the test, to get my diploma, and it keeps going on and on. The question is, did we make a good game? And are there ways to look at the psychology of all the people involved to actually get them to do things in a different way?
So your position, and obviously the position of all of you today, is that the newer games, the newer video games, are more fun and therefore more effective and get more buy-in. But I presume, Gabe, that there are bad educational games as well that are not effective and do not work. You want to tell us about those?
Well, at a broad level, just to key off what was just said there, when we talk about the gamification of the education system, and we talk about this in my new book, The Gamification Revolution, one of the key things that's incredibly important to note, and the corporate side of gamification really has taught us this lesson, is that if you force a group of people to play a game, no matter how fun it is, they're going to kind of resent that. And it's not going to have the same effect on the population that you would expect. It's just like when parents or teachers come to a kid and say, hey, Sonny, you've got to play this game because this is a great game. Kids are going to be skeptical of that idea. So one of the core things that needs to happen is good gamification, good gamified educational learning needs to be something that's built for the target. In this case, if we're talking about students or we're talking about teachers or both of them, it needs to come from the ground up. And one of my favorite examples of that comes from, the company Siemens, the German engineering company Siemens, which has made this online game called Plantville, in which you get to play the manager of a plant. It's a business process game, and you can run a plant, a factory, a nuclear power facility, whatever the case may be. And of the 25,000 or so people who play this game on a regular basis, the majority of them are people who actually run plants for a living. So these people come home at the end of the night, finish their work, sit down in front of the computer, grab a piece of pizza, and fire up a game playing plant manager when they were plant managers all day long. And it seems kind of counterintuitive, but the thing that it shows us is it shows us that if a gamified system is well designed, if it taps into that motivational state that talks to users in the right way, they'll want to keep playing with it, and they want the ability to kind of change the world that they live in, play with its boundaries and stretch it and pull it and learn experiences and engage with them in different ways. And I think we need to understand some of these aspects of how we create this groundswell. We need to be looking at the more corporate examples of gamification as the ones I talk about in the book or at G Summit.
Let's take a look at another one. This one's called Neuromatrix. We're going to take a look at a trailer for this. I actually want to come out of this tape and ask you a question about whether or not you like this. Would you recommend this to your teachers for their students? And whether you can actually make that call based on seeing this trailer alone. Think about this as you look at this. Roll tape, please.
The human brain's under attack. We got rogue nanobots plotting to take over the world. These wads of silicon are smart enough to target the brain of our agent. Human brain makes nanobots feel insecure, so they're erasing everything that's unique about it. Go inside Agent NM7's brain and delete the nanobots permanently.
Now, when you do your job, do you know enough, just from seeing that, to know whether or not this would be effective and good for your teachers and students?
Well, certainly there's a layer of engagement there that is going to cater to like a middle school or a primary level student. And then I'm going to have to look at the outcomes. Okay, so in that health unit or biology unit, what did they need to learn about the brain? And then I'm going to play the game, and I'm going to look at the gameplay. I'm going to look at how fluid it is, because the devil's in the details with a lot of this stuff. It's like, what was that game experience like? And how easily was there this intermix of learning and just moving and getting from A to B, and some of those pieces, which are the engaging part. It's probably why this game was invented, the idea of let's teach kids about the brain, but let's do it in an engaging way, in an environment that they understand, video games. But I'm going to look on a bunch of those layers to really ask the question, is it worth the time?
Are you a tough sell?
I am.
You are?
I think I'm warmly critical. So I'm open, and I'm going to play it all. I'm going to try it all. But the toughest sell is the classroom teacher. And they're only going to buy in when it meets all of those criteria that I mentioned earlier. And that's my job, is to vet that process so they're not going out and trying it all. I'm going to be the gatekeeper.
We can see, Jeremy, from these videos. I mean, there's a lot of talent that goes into creating this stuff.
Yes.
Can you give us some sense about how many people on the team to create this product, how much it costs to develop it, that whole kind of thing?
It completely ranges in terms of development. History Biology as a game had a very small budget attached to it. It was actually developed with almost 12 students at a Centennial College. And actually 2 high school students were involved in that game project. And so it's very tricky to build those games and to build them well because we don't have the budgets that the commercial game industry has.
So budgets, what, 50,000, 100,000?
Yeah, in about that range or less. It completely ranges in terms of what you have access to and the talent pool you can get a hold of. But yeah, they're very small budgets comparatively. And it's very difficult to bring things up to the level of the commercial gamers, but there's no reason we shouldn't.
And when you develop this game and you want to sell it to a school, what do you charge for it?
It's interesting. You know, there are lots of different models out there, but I think, you know, what we're seeing is very much a transition in terms of getting access to content. So when you go to spongelab.com, you can play that game for free. It doesn't cost anything to play that game. We do sell things, like what we sell into the education system is very much access to data and the tools to use the game effectively. But we really are focused on looking at alternative business models that other industries and markets have been applying.
How do you make any money? If I can go to your website and play for nothing, how do you make any money?
It's challenging, but there are very different ways to do this. And so our platform is based on community, and that community drives the development of our game projects as well as partner game projects. And so it's the community that comes together to create the infrastructure to deliver this stuff into the classrooms. So what SpongeLab has been focused on is not just the content, but the vehicles to actually bring the content in, the data-driven processes to validate what's happening in different modes of implementation so that people like Justin can actually run an experiment and say, we're going to deploy Neuromatrix or we're going to deploy this game. Is it working? What's the feedback coming? What's coming back? Am I getting really valuable information about how my students are learning? Or how are they changing over time? What other content are they using with it? And that gives Justin the information to say, yes, this is actually worth the time investment to what they got out of it, or you know what, this was a complete waste of time.
Okay, Jeremy's story notwithstanding, Gabe, how big, just because it sounds like you're not making a killing on this, you'd like to be someday, you're not yet, is that right?
No, the revenue models that we're building were in its infancy, and these things are still very new.
The thing that I want to find out is, worldwide, Gabe, what kind of a business are we looking at here in terms of revenue?
Well, you know, gamification is, as an industry, is on track to be about a $5 billion business by the end of the decade, you know, in the U.S. alone. So it's going to be a fairly large crack. I think the kind of most important thing, though, to look at, and one of the things that, you know, has just been said that's important, is that gamification doesn't need to be very expensive. You know, we have this idea, and we're very focused, especially today, we've been talking a lot about video game models, but you know what? Often gamification can be done with pen and paper. It can be done with board games. We have a great story up on G Summit, one of last year's keynotes at the conference, a guy named Tim Vandenberg, a math teacher out of Southern California, who uses Monopoly, the board game Monopoly, and has had a dramatic effect. He's raised the test scores at his very impoverished school dramatically inside of California. He went from, you know, basically 0 students with the perfect score to 10 students with the perfect score on the math test in just a couple of years, 4 honor roll students to 40 honor roll students, and he does it all with Monopoly, which is a $13 board game. It's the power of good teaching with game modalities. It's not always about building and buying these massive software systems.
Okay, Justin, I want to follow up with you on something that Gabe raised earlier, which is the willingness and openness of teachers to employ these methods. And, you know, for a whole bunch of reasons today, I suspect teachers are feeling under fire from many different directions for a whole host of different reasons, some of them very particular to what's happened here in the province of Ontario over the past several months. Tell us, based on your experience, do teachers like using these things?
I think given a compelling enough example, absolutely.
They don't feel threatened?
No, because I think, like Gabe mentioned earlier, it's not about replacing the teacher.
I know he says that, but yeah. Reality may be a different thing.
Because in many of the games that we bring in at the York School, there's a layer of instructional instruction that goes along with it. There's a scaffolding, there's a discussion that comes in around. And then I guess I'm really interested in the extent to which the game feeds back either something to the user or something to the teacher. What's gleaned from the game other than a score? That can't be it. It has to be beyond that. And when that information comes back at the teacher, when a teacher is presented with a report, an insight into the learning that happened, that couldn't have been achieved otherwise, I think no teacher is going to discount that. I think traditionally we've seen games that have just been everyone's immersed, but I don't know if the learning has been transferred.
Okay, Gabe, I'm not meaning to disparage teachers whom we all love, of course. But there are some teachers who love being up at the front of the classroom and pontificating and are less interested in these new techniques. Well, how do you convince them that this is the way to go?
Well, you know, I have to say I was also a skeptic about teachers' interest in, you know, applying gamification because of the threats. And, you know, even yesterday I was in a discussion where, you know, the opening salvo was about gamification of ed, and the opening salvo was, well, how do we scale up the education system? Obviously, it's going to be with gamification. And I'm like, I don't feel like any of this really makes sense. I think, you know, it's about giving them better tools, as has been described, and better feedback. But they're right to be a little bit concerned about some of this. And frankly, I think if you put yourself in the shoes of the average older teacher, if you're, you know, my age or 10, 15 years older than me, you know, the video games that you have been exposed to they haven't really felt like something that could be used for education. You're looking at, you know, pretty violent stuff. You've grown up, your kids have grown up playing, you know, Atari type games or, you know, PlayStation or Xbox games, and you may not immediately see how games and gamification can be used broadly to educate. So that bias is understandable. The biggest gap here is generational, and we see that in every aspect of gamification, whether I'm talking about it to enterprises at G Summit or I'm talking about it to teachers. It's the same thing over and over again. A lot of this depends on your age. If you're under 25 and someone says gamification in the classroom to you, you go, duh. And if you're over 50, you have questions, right? And I'm not saying that there's a right or wrong answer there, but some of this is about bringing back some of these core elements to older teachers, let's say, who might be a little bit more resistant, and showing them why games can deliver superior experience alongside their teaching skill.
Jeremy, have you run into any outright hostility among boards, principals, teachers who say, no, this is just newfangled, you know, younger generation crap, not interested?
We have come in, so we actually do a lot of research on the stuff that we create. And the things that we've come into is, well, show me this is better. Why is this better? And it really comes down to, well, what are you measuring as your outcomes? And I think it's an important question to ask. If your outcomes are, I just want to see an improvement on this particular test, what is the most cost-effective, time-effective way to do that? It may or may not be a game. So it's looking at what is the motivation to use a game if all you want to see is these numbers move from here to here. The other side of it, if you're now looking at, well, I really want to get my students thinking more, to be creative and to try things and to experiment, then if that is your your outcome that you're measuring, yes, these things actually do work and work very, very well. And that's when you get that buy-in at that point.
Okay, so that's the teacher angle. Justin, I want to go to you now on the student angle. The gifted student, the average student, the student who struggles. What do studies show us about which student benefits most from this approach?
Right, and so in this, with students who are, let's just say, not engaged, not interested in learning, for a variety of reasons, social, emotional, you name it, maybe this is a way in, maybe this is a way of connecting. And I think we really need to differentiate here and exactly pair the tool with the student. Much the same way that we would do that with instructional practices. In education today, we talk about differentiation, we talk about multiple learning styles. If this particular tool, game, lets me enter into a conversation with a student, it's a gateway, then great, I'm going to use it. I'm going to try and get to them any way I can. But for a higher order thinking student who is going to see right through this and is going to see it as a waste of time, I'm not going to use it.
Jeremy, trying to put you on the couch. I'm told you were a lousy student. Is that true back in the day?
Yeah, I think, you know, looking back, school was a struggle for me.
And if you'd had this?
It would have been very, very different.
You think so?
Yeah.
You think you'd have been more engaged, enjoyed it, all of that more?
I'm not just talking about if I was playing games. I don't think playing games for your entire education is what I needed. But what I needed was the ability to learn in different ways. And I didn't realize this till I was in university that the way I learn is very, very different. But I think all the research is showing that most people do learn in a very different way. And I think these types of approaches, and it's not just about a game, and it can be a computer game, it can be a board game, or it can be any kind of alternative framework that we can recognize that people learn in different ways. And we have the tools at hand now to be able to deliver that type of learning in a very personalized way.
Gabe, I want to talk about gender with you. Can you tell us whether or not boys versus girls react differently to this approach?
I can, but before I do that, I just want to say I disagree a little bit with the question about gifted kids versus kids who struggle. I think, you know, my memory of being kind of a higher achieving student was that the gamified things that we were doing at the time, including in reading, were places in which I absolutely thrived because I was able to be self-directed as a student. So one of the things that stronger students have trouble with is when they move faster in a particular subject, it's very difficult if the mode of instruction is the teacher doing a uniform kind of teaching plan, right? Where they've got to be, you know, teaching to everyone in the class. So gifted students with the ability to be self-directed, which most games explicitly allow you to be self-directed, they actually benefit from that kind of teaching environment. As also we hear anecdotally, lots of kids with learning spectrum issues, including autism spectrum disorder, seem to come more alive in the game world for whatever reason, you know, without a lot of data. So there's definitely anecdotal evidence on both sides. To your point about gender, you know, what we see, I think, increasingly with the gamer generation, especially with the younger millennials today, many of those gender differences around gameplay have actually they're going away. So the classic idea that boys like to play violent games, which I think was an assertion that you made earlier, and girls like to play more puzzle games, they're rooted in some degree of fact, and we don't always know why, but those differences are narrowing as these generations grow up with more and more games in general, and they tend to play, you know, they've got a lot of common denominator type games that tend to be more exploratory puzzle, you know, problem solving oriented.
Justin, what's your opinion about, or what does the evidence show you on boys versus girls on this?
I would agree with Gabe. I think that's all narrowing the breadth and depth to which the game landscape is available to kids. There's something for everybody, and certainly there are trends in the types of games boys and girls play. But I think that's completely interchangeable, and it's definitely narrowing across the board.
Okay, with just a few minutes to go, we wanted to let everybody know that we're in this game as well. TVO Kids launched 2 free educational apps designed to help young children with their memories. Let's take a look at a clip. Roll tape, please.
If Train A left Sudbury at 9 a.m., traveling at 100 kilometers per hour, and Train B left Ottawa at 11 a.m., traveling at 125 kilometers per hour.
Do you ever feel overwhelmed at school? Wish there was someone who could help?
Now there is. Introducing Hop and Ribbit, the stars of 2 great new game apps from TVO Kids that will supercharge your brain. Smart games for smarter brains. Hop Frog Hop and Ribbit Frog Ribbit, now available on these platforms and on TVOkids.com.
Jeremy, is part of the reason all of this is happening today because we all have, apparently, incredibly short attention spans now. And we just can't learn the way we did when we were kids or our parents did, et cetera, et cetera.
I don't know if anything's changed with us. I think we now have new tools available to us, and we're just seeing the grand experiment. And you're seeing a massive influx of different types of technologies, different platforms, different types of content. And really, we're throwing it into the mix right now and seeing what's working. And I think some people are really gravitating to the way those things work. Does that look like short attention span? It's possible.
Justin?
I downloaded that game last night and just to test it. Yeah, it's the tactile piece of the iPad replaced the flashcard and cardboard cutouts of the past. And so it's a much more, we've got audio, we've got video, we've got an engaging piece. It's still doing the same thing, but it's portable. You can take it anywhere, you can update it. And so there's a few pieces that are just better for something like that.
Dare we say it's more fun?
It's more fun.
It's more fun, okay. Gabe, let me put this to you. The games have been studied and they have been found to improve working memory and self-regulation better than your sort of regular, straight, everyday math game. And the research suggests that playing these games can counteract things such as attention deficit disorder. You buying that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I have to say, like, I'm so grateful that TVO is doing all this stuff. I'm a little bitter that there's no Pokeroo educational gamified system as somebody who grew up with the character. But I'm happy to help work on it anytime. I'd love to bring Pokeroo back into my life. In the meantime,
you missed the Pokeroo, eh, Gabe? Pokeroo hasn't made it to New York or Philly?
You know what? I carry Pokeroo around with me every day of my life. I just gotta say. But one of the things that's without question, when you look, especially when you look at segments of the population like those with autism spectrum disorder, particularly sort of on the sort of higher functioning end of that. One thing that you definitely see both anecdotally and kind of coming out in research a little bit is that, games are able to deliver a medium in which those kids who often have difficulty expressing themselves, who often have difficulty connecting with others, are able to express themselves and be more socially functional in that environment and able to absorb information better and able to communicate with each other. The jury's out on how these things affect each other, what's cause and what's effect in this environment. But one thing that I'll tell you, I hear this from autistic parents of autistic children all the time, that they love the fact that games have enabled their kids to really connect in a way that they couldn't without them.
Great. Gentlemen, that's our time. And I want to thank you all for being great game sports for our program today. Gabe Zickerman, thanks for being there on the line from Philadelphia, PA. He's the chair of the Gamification Summit. And look for his new book coming out in April called The Gamification Revolution. Thanks a lot, Gabe, and Pokeroo sends his best. Jeremy Friedberg is here in the studio. He's the co-founder of Sponge Lab Interactive, and Justin Medved is the technology and learning specialist at the York School, one of Toronto's fine independent schools.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.